Micah, I noticed last week you had some really late nights. Are you recovered? I mean, I know we had the time change this week, but it makes it even feel like a shorter week with how busy you were last week and up in Yakima.
I don't know what day it is. I was in a department meeting yesterday. I got some colleague's name wrong. I'm all over the place. But as far as have I recovered, I'm going to go out to a softball game today in 40-degree weather and probably raining. So, yeah, I still got a little something in the tank. Wow, what a weekend of state basketball. It's always eventful. It's always dramatic. And for me, it was kind of a surprising weekend because I think when we came into the week, we were thinking a lot of the attention was going to be in Tacoma at the 4As. It ended up being a lot of the drama was where I was in Yakima at the 2As.
Yeah, you had some great games that you got to be a part of and watch. The whole week. Yeah, every time we go and we plan these weeks out, we usually map it out about, it's like, okay, what teams do we think is going to go far? But then we also we do the opposite. We sit there and go, what happens if everyone loses, right? Mm-hmm. And so, going into Wednesday up in Yakima, we had Columbia River boys. They were the 11th seed, and they were playing the 3 seed Sela, so we didn't really know how that was, going to play out. And then Seton Catholic girls were battling injury, and we didn't know how many healthy bodies they were going to have. And then Kingsway girls was the 16th seed, so you don't know what's going on there. So we were kind of thinking, well, what happens Thursday if all you got to do is sit around and wait for R.A. Long to play at 9 o'clock on Thursday? And then it turns out River wins, Seton wins. You got another busy Thursday. Seton makes it to the semifinals. You got semifinals in both.
Or River makes it.
River makes it to the semifinals. So we got locals in both semis. And in the championship game, third place game on Saturday, it was just a whole bunch of stuff, which is great for fans and everything to give them coverage.
Well, it wasn't just that teams advanced, and I think the seeding committee probably needs to think twice about seeding River boys as number 11. That's 2 years in a row that the Rapids have gone there as a number 11 seed and left Yakima with a trophy. But the drama in the games that we covered, both in the semifinals on Friday and in the eventual championship between R.A. Long and Bremerton on Saturday, was just top notch. I mean, to recap, Columbia River, they hang with defending champion and top seed Bremerton, led by Jalen Davis, who is probably the state's top recruit in the class of 2027. It goes down to the wire, and boy, River had them, and Coach Mark Ganter will say as much. I mean, they led going into the fourth quarter. They're playing great defense. It comes down, it's one of those things where if maybe one of 5 to 6 to 7 things in the final minute of regulation or in overtime goes differently in River's favor, it probably doesn't come down to the end when Jalen Davis wins it at the buzzer.
Right. I think all week long, all 4 games River played, there were close, tight games. And I think the games that River won, they were able to do those things and seal out those wins at the end. And then the games they lost, they weren't. And so, just a tremendous effort by the River boys to, come in from 11th seed. And they were, third in their own league to even get there and advance and to battle through all the way to the very end. The semifinal game was an amazing finish. Not for, River fans, probably don't think so, but just as a spectator in general to watch one of the state's top players take the ball and go down the court and 3.3 seconds and score on a layup. I'm still amazed every time I would watch that video about how close he got it to be,
and that's probably something we should talk about, because there were people saying it shouldn't have counted. There were people asking why they don't have replay at the state tournament. I even had someone asked me, my youngest daughter does go to River. We live in the neighborhood. I had a neighbor ask me, so you tell me that a kid can go the entire floor in 3 seconds? I was like, not a lot of high school kids can, but this one can.
Yeah, and it was clear too that, as I thought about it, So it was kind of an interesting situation. So it was 3.8 seconds to go when the free throw was attempted and missed, and Bremerton got the rebound. So there was 2:08 on the clock when they called timeout, but then the refs put a half a second back on to 3-3.
Which was the right call, because the rebound came off, hit the floor, but the clock doesn't stop until a player, or the clock doesn't start until a player touches it. And you could see the Bremerton rebounder immediately calls.
Right. I was watching on the video too. I saw the Bremerton coach talking to a ref before the free throw saying, hey, if we get this rebound, we want a timeout. Right. So 3.3 seconds to go. I'm sure it's a play that most teams, they practice those scenarios. I remember when I was in high school, we would end almost every practice with a different end of game scenario. And so I'm sure Jalen Davis had an idea about how much time he had when he crossed midcourt. I'm sure he had eyes on the scoreboard, the clock, and he had an idea about how much time he had. Still, given that, I mean, most times you see a buzzer beater shot, and if you watch the NCAA tournament later this month or any other close game, usually the shot goes off and the ball's midair and the horn sounds, This was it was just out of his hand with 0.1 seconds left to go when he released it. I was still sort of amazed that he didn't, do some sort of runner in the key or something off the glass to get the ball out of his hands to make it that close. But, I watched a lot of replays. I've seen some still shots. At least as far as whether or not he got the ball out of his hand before the clock hit zero, it was pretty revealing and pretty conclusive that he did. I mean, whether
barely.
Barely. And you can make the argument of whether or not the clock started on time. I can't tell that one. And the NFHS feed in this particular one, sometimes they have a clock in set on their scoreboard, but this one at Yakima, they didn't. So you couldn't really see, if the clock got started on time or anything like that. But anyway, just an amazing confidence in Jalen Davis to get down there and get it done, and the knowledge also to know that the situation that River down by one, we're not going to want to foul.
So you make a beeline.
Yeah, you make it and you go straight to the hole.
Like you can get there.
Yeah, you go straight to the hole. You go aggressive because they will not want to foul you because it's going to put him on the line. 2 free throws, make 1, you send it to overtime, make 2, they win. So situation would change if it was a 2-point deficit. I think we were talking back at the office, you said he probably puts up a 3 if it's a 2-point deficit.
I think they have to go for 3 if that's the situation.
Yeah, so the situation changes there. So just so many variables that go on, and I frankly, if you're a River fan, I think you want to know that he got the shot off in time, because otherwise it makes it even more gut wrenching to know that he didn't.
Right, and I'll talk about River and kind of how impressed I was with just their closeness and the way they supported each other after that game. But before we leave it, I did have some people, whether it be on press row or from the River section, being like, why don't we have replay in the state championship tournament? And I think people don't realize it's not that simple as just having a camera and going to a monitor and saying, and number one, I think even if you had the most sophisticated NBA level replay system, it's close enough that going by those rules where you have to have clear and conclusive evidence, you're not overturning the call on the court.
Right. I was watching a Oregon State baseball game over the weekend, and there was a play at second base where the second baseman or shortstop was a force play, and he was the ball was high, and he went up to catch it, and they had ruled that he got the force out, but the other team thought he came off the bag early. And when I watched the replay, I thought, ooh, maybe he did, but they didn't overturn it because it wasn't conclusive enough.
Clear and obvious. Yeah.
And so that's, once they make the call on this one, it's one of those 50-50 situations. And as far as, the replays, even at the WIA likes to do things all one way or all no way.
Yeah.
And so if they did put some video replay rule, they would want all season long, not just at the state tournament. And that's really not feasible. It's like I had one person on social media go, took forever for us to get shot clock in every gym. Can't get cameras. But even at the state tournament, one of the sort of unfortunate things about, in high school sports and the state basketball champions, we don't have a TV contract. There's no like cable network or somebody covering this where they would have the technology with all these cameras. At Yakima, they didn't have multiple cameras. They just had the fixed camera at midcourt. In Yakima, they had the student-led camera, so they did have multiple cameras. But, even then, they might not be able to have the technology to pull that off. And so...
well, and if you're talking about a millisecond difference on a buzzer beater, is the backboard and the with the red lights around the backboard and the clock, are they calibrated to the level that you get at
right.
Higher levels of that? I don't know that you can say that definitively.
Yeah, so it's it was just a wild finish, and then back in the title game, Bremerton and R.A. Long, another wild finish there too.
I was thinking about it. It's certainly it's gutting the way River lost, and again, nothing but praise for kind of that senior class, 9 seniors. Most of them have played together since elementary school. They really rallied around each other, and before they just ran out of gas in the third place game. They came back, and they were the more aggressive team, the more energetic team, playing for each other. Just can't have enough to say about how they lifted each other up, and wrote a piece about that appeared in Tuesday's paper.
Right,
but,
and it was their 4th game in 4 nights, and they were all
two overtime
games.
Yeah.
They were all tight. They were all emotional. It's very understandable to see how they could kind of have the tank hit empty there on them. So
and they did, and Mark Ganter, their coach, said as much afterwards. The Lakes just gave out, but as gutting as that loss to Bremerton in the semifinals was for River, I'm almost more frustrated if I'm R.A. Long and how that went down in the championship game. Just like River, R.A. Long had they had the game in position to be won. They were up by 5 with under 1:30 to go, I think. But the game ends up being decided on what I thought was a pretty ticky-tack foul call, where that sent Jalen Davis to the line with, I think, 5 seconds to go and makes 2 free throws. It's one of these hand check things. And at that point, I'm like, I don't think you can call that foul in that situation.
Yeah, a lot of times you'll hear at state tournaments, goes, they kind of let kids play, let them play at the state championship. But then I saw it in other playoff games during the course of the postseason, is like they let them play, but then down in this key situation, then they make that call that they wouldn't make in the third quarter or the second quarter. And then, I kind of feel like, once the game gets down, and especially if it's tied like it was tied, no one's a losing or winning,
based on a non-call.
Yeah. You got to I think at that point it kind of becomes a little bit like playground ball. You got to play through. You got to, there's going to be a little bit of contact. You got to give and take both ways. I was at a game earlier in this pro season where a team was down by 2 with about 20 seconds to go, and they got called for an illegal screen with about 9 seconds. And I watched the video on that and kind of went, okay, maybe, yeah. But it's got to be, for me, it's got to be a call that everyone in the gym goes, oh my gosh, that was an illegal screen. You got to kind of, I think, let the kids play it out that way. And so I can understand, R.A. Long's frustration of that. But at the same time, and the same goes true for every basketball team that loses a close game, there are things you just can't control, right? Yeah. You can't control maybe a rim is being a little bit firm than you're used to, or the background of the shooting, or anything. And one of the things you can't control is the officiating. And so you have to sort of play through that. It's kind of like if you were outside and playing in the wind and the rain, you've got to take that into account. You got to overcome that. And that's just another thing that you have to overcome. So you have to manage the things that you can control as best you can. And so
I've heard so many coaches say we need to leave no doubt to where the officiating isn't a factor in the final minutes.
Right, and I think that's where you kind of go back is, and then again, it's hard in the last game of the season because there's nothing to improve upon for the next game because there's no other next game. But if it had happened during the course of the regular season, that would be something that you would go back on film and say, I was like, okay, there was this call at the end, and we didn't agree with the call, but let's look at the film. Here's one thing that we didn't do. Here's another thing that we did. And we could probably find half a dozen things that we could have done better that would have taken that play out of play.
Well, I remember talking with Skyview coach Matt Grueller midseason. He was kind enough to come in with Brett Henry and do a roundtable on transfers, and he had just come off a game earlier in the week where it came down to the wire between Skyview and Camas, and one of these things where Skyview, I think it was a tie game going into the final seconds, and Skyview had a really great defensive scheme, and they knew the ball was probably going to go at Ethan Harris, and they got defensive clamp down up, foul line extended, not where he wanted to be, and they get a reach-in call at, with 2 seconds left or something like that. And so I mentioned to Matt, I was like, oh, that was a rough call. Do you think that went the right way? He's like, I didn't like the call, but you can't reach in. It just, don't give the officials an opportunity to make a call. So, yeah, but lots to talk. I think it's been all anybody, certainly in the office, has been talking about just those 2 games.
And to your point, to Columbia River and the 11 seed, District 4 got 3 teams into the tournament, and they were all playing on Saturday, right? So you had R.A. Long was the 2 seed. They were in the championship game. Tumwater was the 5 seed, and they were playing in a trophy game on Saturday. And then you had Columbia River, the 11 seed, come through and was in the 3rd place game as well. So, and this is something that, we couldn't get a really good feel for during the course of the season, because it's like it was hard to sort of figure out how good the teams here in the area are. You don't really know that until they kind of go out and play in the state.
Especially in the 2A, they start their league season so early compared to everybody else.
It dominates their schedule.
They're not spending early and mid-December going up to Tacoma or over to Yakima. They're playing league games against Washougal, Woodland, Mark Morris.
Right, and the other part about that too is not only you're playing tough games against teams from the other parts of the state, but you're also not getting the experience of other officiating crews in other parts of the state, because they might officiate a little bit different. And of course, I think they officiate differently again in the state tournament too, and so things change. But just getting exposed to all those different atmospheres get you better prepared for those situations when they come down at clutch time. So, when you got a 7-team league, they got 14 league games. They get about 6, maybe 7 if they have a foundation game outside of league. And so, it can, cause you to make some decisions. And then, there's travel expenses. For us in Southwest Washington to go and play teams from out of the state is a journey. It's like 2 hours, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours to go and play somebody, so it's not always easy.
Right. Well, it was a weekend of firsts for a few programs. Number one, a first win in the Sun Dome for Seton Catholic girls. They made it last year after winning their opening round game, punching their ticket to the quarterfinals, but then they lost in the quarterfinals in the subsequent game after that. This year, the Cougars had to go through the round of 12, but this time they won. First time ever for a team that was kind of banged up and short on numbers. That was really, I thought, a highlight for them. And then Evergreen girls get the first trophy in program history. I think a great accomplishment for that team. Yeah,
the Seton Catholic, like I mentioned earlier, we didn't know what they were going to be able to bring when they got to the Sun Dome last week. In their so they lose point guard Madison Lee back in early February, and she's with a knee injury. She's done. And then in the opening round game against Zilla in the weekend before, Naomi Jackson didn't play. She had been kind of battling a lingering knee issue as well. She didn't play in that game. And then C.J. Moore, right before halftime against Zilla, tries to contest a 3-point shot right close to the buzzer, and she ends up coming down on the foot of the shooter for Zilla, and she rolls her ankle, and she was done for the year. And so we didn't know if they were going to have 5 experienced players going to have to go through. And as it came back, Naomi Jackson came back, and that 10-day rest was enough for her to be able to come back. And so we don't really know what they were going to bring. I think we saw in the Zilla game what the potential was, because before CJ got hurt, it was 20-19 at halftime, and then Zilla comes out and goes 25-0 in the third quarter and into the fourth quarter. And I think the injury to CJ was probably just a gut shot for that team. It's like, what else can we have to deal with?
Phil Kent told me as much, their coach. He's like, the true identity of our team is that team that went toe to toe with Zilla in the first half, and we had to change our identity between then and coming into the Sun Dome, and they still had a lot of confidence that they played to their identity, they would be okay, and they were that round of 12 game, but then they go in the quarterfinals against top seeded Kings and actually started pretty well. They were ahead in the first quarter, but then Kings, they have one of the best small school players in the state, and I think she ended up with like 27 or 29 points, and it was just too much for them. And then kind of like you mentioned with some of the other teams, the boys teams, that's a grind to play 3 games in 3 days, and if you're only using a 6-player rotation, that third day it starts to catch up with you, and that's what happened. I thought.
Yeah, it's injuries are things. It's part of sports, and teams have to deal with it every year. It's frustrating. I think for the Seton girls, I think they would have liked to see what they could have done, with Madison Lee, with CJ Moore, with Naomi Jackson fully healthy. I think they would have liked to see what they could have done at the Sun Dome, but at least they got there.
And they got a win there.
Yeah, and they got a win. Camas boys lost Ethan Harris to injury, didn't play in the opening round, and they didn't make it to the final site. So, as far as the Evergreen girls, I went back and looked at the WIA website about the program history, and I was surprised to see that going into the state tournament, not only had they hadn't trophied, but they haven't even posted a win in a state playoff game. They had played a couple of opening rounds or regional rounds, or whatever the verbiage was, a couple of years ago, and then back around 2012 or so. And then the previous one before that was they were when there was in a double elimination tournament at the Seattle Center in the late 80s, but they went 2-0 in that tournament. So to come through and get that round of 12 win, I mean, they get to stay and ended up staying all the way to Saturday and earning a trophy. Again, coming back and winning games, Thursday and Friday to make that happen. Or actually, they got to the quarterfinals, but they won on Friday to get the trophy round. So they won Wednesday and Friday. It was a great credit to them. Great credit to the program. They do have a lot of younger players on that roster who'll be coming back. They did suffer a big loss with the graduation of Kimora Ross. She's such a big part of that program over the last 4 years. But she leaves a legacy of success and something to build on. So, it was good to see.
Yeah, I couldn't be more impressed with Evergreen. Not only Kimora Ross being that steady difference maker for all 4 years, and being the only senior who played significant minutes this year. And so you've got the nucleus of a really strong team coming back. And so I think the future is definitely bright over there at Evergreen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we would have thought going into that last weekend, or even thinking about it a month ago, that the last team we'd have playing in Tacoma would be the Evergreen girls.
Yep.
So good for them. Congratulations to the Plainsmen.
Well, another reason that I think going into the weekend, a lot of our focus was on Tacoma is because of Union, and specifically Brooklynn Haywood making a run at the state's career scoring record, and she fell a little short, but ends up second place all time. Certainly one of the most prolific scorers we'll ever see come through this area. Yeah,
I had somebody on social media, in a comment said that 29.52 at the 4A level is a greater accomplishment than 29.94 as a 1A player. So that's a fair argument. You're going up against tougher competition. For her to even get within shouting range of that record, I thought was an amazing accomplishment in itself. I mean, we were talking about this back in January, I think, when she cleared like 2,500 points. And you would do the math, and you kind of go, well, she's kind of going to have to average like 35, 36 points, and that's such a high number to average and do that game after game after game. You're going to run into somebody who's going to, play a good defense and hold you back. But she kept surpassing that number. She kept going 38 and 42 and 52 and
the consistency.
And then it just kept lowering that average down to where it's like, okay, it's in range. But as she said, she knew she needed to get to Saturday for that to happen. And unfortunately, that didn't happen for the Union girls. I'm sure they were disappointed. They were the number 2 seed and they had expectation. I think the bracket might have got them a little bit. I think Kennedy Catholic beating Sumner in the bi-district. I think that's where they expected to see Sumner the first time around, is in the bi-district tournament, and they didn't. And so they just kind of cruised the bi-district tournament. And then they get to the Tacoma Dome with the shooting background and the big stage setting. And that's where they ran into Sumner and then later Woodinville. And, it's kind of, I'm sure it's frustrating because they looked over at Kennedy Catholic and they were holding the 3rd place trophy. And they were saying, just 2 weeks ago, we thumped those guys pretty good, So sometimes it's just matchups and situations. And, it was, after Union had lost on Thursday, then the attention goes to, well, they got to win tomorrow so they can get to Saturday and maybe. But the other thing too, as I was looking at the bracket after it was finished, the only team that put more than 70 points on the board through the whole tournament was Davis.
It is very difficult.
Otherwise, everybody else is practically in the
outputs.
50s, and it's kind of hard to average 33 or 30 or whatever when your team's scoring 52 points. It's a big percentage, and so it's just kind of the way that the game is played at state. That's going to be lower scoring.
It tightens down.
It tightens down. The shooting percentages are going to go down. So that's what made it, so difficult on Brooklyn. Even if she had made it to Saturday. Assuming that she didn't score more than the 25 that she did on Friday, it would have been like 42 points or something to catch, which would have been a lot anyway. But so just to get into the discussion there is an amazing accomplishment. It's something that you and I will never probably see covering high school sports down here in Southwest Washington.
No, and what makes it even more amazing is that Brooklyn did not have a deep state run her freshman and sophomore years. So unlike some of the top scorers who are part of these programs that you can bank they're going to be playing through to the final Saturday at the final site every year, all 4 years, Brooklyn basically had, maybe 7 to 8 fewer games.
Yeah, and they were eliminated in the bi-district tournament freshman and sophomore year, and so they didn't get to the state playoffs. Last year they played the opening round and then the round of 12. If they maybe win a game here, I think they played a winner to state game her sophomore year. If they win that game, they get to the opening round and maybe get an opportunity for another game or a couple other games. You add 2-3 more games. Maybe she clears 3,000.
Yeah. But regardless, I'm excited to see what she does at Oregon. And definitely, I don't think, like you said, we'll ever see as prolific a scorer come through this area. But you never know. You never know. All right. Well, any thoughts about spring? We're heading into that.
It's funny. Every time I get this question all the time. Is like people ask me, they're like, well, "What's your favorite season to cover?" And I think if anyone who covers high school sports, if they said they only had to choose one season to cover, that season would be fall, because that's when football happens, and football is such a big stage and such a big thing. But I think every year, every season that you go into, you're looking forward to something, right? So you come out of the fall and it's like November and you've been outside covering soccer and football and it's cold, and you go back inside and it's like, oh, it's so nice and warm. But then by the time you move into the spring, you're like, yeah, I'm ready to go back outside, especially like the weekend of the opening round of the basketball tournament. It's
beautiful.
It was beautiful out. It was like great out. Last week, it was a little bit rainier and colder.
In Yakima, it was 60 degrees and sunny. Yeah.
And then now it's like, it's 45 and rainy and stuff.
Typical.
It's supposed to be nicer next week. It's supposed to get up in the 60s, maybe up in upper 60s next week. So hopefully the weather turns nice here next week, because the baseball classic, the Clark County Baseball Classic that got launched last year, will be happening all over Clark County, not this weekend, but next weekend. And last year it was kind of cold and it was typical March Northwest weather. So I'm looking forward. I'm always looking forward to a new season, new chapter, and seeing how the school year ends and seeing what kind of things, different stories come and break out.
Yeah, I always enjoy the first month of the spring season because you're coming off an incredibly, especially for me, the last decade, really, I've gone from Mat Classic, which is all consuming, to state opening round where you're dealing with high stakes and sometimes teams, their season ends, it's really emotional, to the state basketball final sites where it's just long days, busy, high drama, and you just come out of that feeling like, I'm just running on fumes. And then, a week later, you're out at a baseball game, you're out at a softball game, and, hopefully the weather's nice, and, you can have, you can pull a coach aside and just kind of have a casual conversation or just catch up with, people you haven't seen in a while. It's just a really good reset.
Yeah, especially because in the early part of the spring season, you don't go out and cover games per se. You don't go out and do a game story and recap a game because those become more important as you head down into late April and early May. You're usually trying to go out there and you're trying to search for stories, trying to go up and just say hi and take photos and get out. And the calendar has changed over the years. It used to be we used to finish one of the state basketball tournaments, and then the very next week you were right into spring. And then when they sort of condensed down to this 3-day, and then later they added back the 4-day, but they condensed all the state tournament basketball in the same week. Then there was a week off. We had a dead week in between the end of winter and the start of spring. And now, because they've lowered the preseason practice requirement, it used to be 10 practices and now it's 7, you're going to a game later today, and there's a whole bunch on the schedule on Wednesday, and then Friday there's a whole bunch, and we haven't even the first track and field meet doesn't start till next week, and I think the first golf event is probably next week as well. So we haven't even gotten to the whole spring season yet until next week. But it gives us a little bit of time to kind of take our breath, reset, and then get ready to head outdoors.
But it's also a reminder of how quickly time passes. It feels like it was just football season getting warmed up yesterday, and here we are talking about spring, and then we'll be talking about the end of the school year and our award ceremony and all that. So really, take these moments in because it does go fast. I'm paraphrasing what a couple of the seniors on the Seton Catholic girls team told me. It's hey, just yesterday it seemed like we were freshmen in this program, and now here we are. We just played our final game with this uniform on. So advice to younger players, take it all in because it goes fast.
Indeed.
All right. Thanks for tuning in. We'll have a few periodic episodes during the spring. I look forward to talking about whatever issues come up, delve into some deeper themes. But thanks for following us all throughout the basketball and the winter season. And we will see you next time.